I've entitled this The Final Budget 2011-2012. The board will not vote on the final budget tonight. They will be acting on it a week from tonight on the 28th. You're all welcome to come to that meeting. It's the formal budget hearing, and we will answer questions at that time specific to the budget. We're, of course, available to answer questions tonight. If you have questions, we'll attempt to answer them as well. As we started our budget discussions, we began with a discussion at the board level on what our values are, what we care about enough, what are we willing to fight for when times get difficult. And in a difficult economic environment, it was important to begin with what we care about most before we start talking about what type of things we would do without. The board looked at our programs, our kids, our processes, and basically came to the conclusion that we wanted to, as great extent possible, to maintain the programs that we currently have for our kids going into next year. That whatever they had this year, they would have next year. But we were faced with some very significant cost drivers. The first one, by far the largest, is the increase in healthcare cost. Our broker told us to prepare for a 19% increase in our health coverage. That, when we look at the other costs, major cost drivers in the budget, which is capital improvements, our curriculum and instruction lines, and technology, if you add up the capital improvements, curriculum and instruction and technology, it doesn't even amount to the increase in the health care. So we had a very significant challenge as we developed the tentative budget. The good news was we began with the premise that we would not be reducing any teachers, that class sizes would not increase, and that we would not reduce any programs for our students. That was the most important part. And that was what we promised as we came out of the tentative budget. Now that we have settlement, we have more good news. Assuming, of course, that the budget passes, there will be no need to privatize any of the close to 270 individuals who were contemplated for privatization as part of the tentative budget. Now, let me hit the high points of the agreement. This is not exhaustive, but this is really the financial implications of the new agreement that the HEA ratified tonight, that we'll be asking the board to ratify also. The first part, kind of a unique way of looking at it, is that the agreement will not begin on the typical July 1 start date. That the first year of the agreement will begin April 1st of this year, which means that there's a law that says that all public employees need to contribute 1.5% of their salary to offset the cost of health care benefit. That will begin during the last quarter of this contract, of this school year. The second year of the contract, or during the 11-12 school year, the HEA membership has agreed to a 12% contribution to their health care premium and an increase in salary of 1.5%. The following school year, the 2012-2013 school year, the HEA has agreed, and the board has agreed, that they will contribute an 18% towards their cost towards the health care premium costs, and will receive a 2% salary increase during that year. So once again, it's a 2-year and 3-month contract. The first part of the contract, HEA members will contribute during the last quarter of the school year 1.5% of salary to offset the health care. Year 2, 1.5% increase on salary plus a 12% contribution to health care. Year 3, a 2% increase in salary and an 18% contribution towards health care. And this is basically what balanced out the savings for that made privatization not necessary. When we look back a year ago from today, we were reducing at that point 45 teachers, 5 administrators, 16 other supporting staff members, for a total of 66 employees that were reduced last year. When we look at programmatic reductions last year, we saw the elimination of the Spanish program at the elementary schools. Currently, we're out of compliance. We need to develop that program. We also saw class sizes increase as well across all grade levels in different buildings and at different grade configurations. So, getting back to how we're developing the budget, our first step was to look at efficiencies, was to try to find and wring out as much as we can within the budget and still maintain the quality of our programs. And here's a listing of many of the larger efficiencies that we were able to reap from our budget. This constitutes close to $330,000 worth of reductions. But Hillsborough has had a long legacy of being highly efficient and very prudent in their spending. Annually, the State Department of Education publishes a report called the Comparative Spending Guide. That allows us to compare a per pupil expenditure from one district to another so you can see how well or how frugal one district is relative to other districts throughout the state. When we take a look at our per pupil expenditures, our total per pupil expenditures, when we compare it to the state average as well as to similar districts, and we're in a group of 110 districts throughout the state that are configured at K through 12 with 3,500 students or more, we actually spend 12% less than similar districts. That's actually more than $1,000 less per student. When we take a look at total administrative costs per pupil, the savings is even more significant. We are spending 23% less per pupil when we compare ourselves to similar districts and well below the state average. When we took a look after finding efficiencies, we're now trying to look at ways that we can generate revenue back into the budget. And we're developing long-range plans to try to see if we can get into different types of enterprises. We're going to be looking at expanding our summer enhancement programs. We're going to look at developing an adult school and child care. This is not something that happens immediately, but we hope will happen over a period of time. One area that we are looking at jump-starting in September of the next school year is looking at tuition for full-day kindergarten, where parents whose children are in the half-day program, we only have half-day kindergarten in our public schools now, can for a fee remain for the full day. And we surveyed parents during kindergarten registration that occurred during, I believe, the first or second week in March, and we had a lot of interest in this area. So we're very optimistic that we can get this off the ground and helping us to offset existing costs within the budget. The third area that we were looking at was to find less expensive alternatives for non-instructional services, which was the privatization. And of course, there's no need for it due to the change in the negotiated agreement at this point. So our school budget. Budget bottom line is $110 million, a little bit more than $110 million. And this represents slightly below 3%, slightly above about 2.8% increase over last year's budget. When we take a look at how that relates to the tax levy and the tax assessment, it gets a little complicated. Hillsborough is going through a reassessment. We are currently seeing a significant drop in the tax rate. And I want to emphasize this. That doesn't necessarily mean that your taxes are going to be going down. You have to take a look at how much your property is reassessed at and then multiply that by the tax rate factor. And we have a chart here that can give you some sense of how much your taxes will be relative to your reassessed value of your home. We will publish this online at our website, so when you have some time to actually take a look at this, if you're interested, it will be available on our website. Property taxes are difficult for everybody, especially during difficult economic times, but it's probably most difficult for those in our community that are on a fixed income. Many of our senior citizens have a difficult time making ends meet. There is a law that has been on the books for a relatively lengthy period of time, but the eligibility levels have changed since 2009. So if you're a senior citizen, that you're 65 years or older, have lived in New Jersey for 10 years, have lived in your residence for about 4 years, and have paid your property taxes, and your household income is less than $80,000 a year, you could qualify to have your property taxes frozen. I have had an opportunity to meet with the Senior Citizen A group to explain this and to help make that available for them, and I'll be meeting with the Senior Citizens B group later in the month. There's also more information online from the Division of Taxation. Some fast facts about Hillsborough and New Jersey public school education. There is an assessment that's done annually called the National Assessment of Educational Progress, and it allows one to compare how one state does relative to another state. New Jersey is typically in the top 10% of all states in our country. New Jersey performs exceptionally high. When we take a look at how Hillsborough kids perform relative to other districts in the state of New Jersey, we're typically in the top quartile of performance. So we're in the top quartile in a state that's in the top 10% of the country. So I don't believe it's an exaggeration to say that our children do exceptionally well. Some final key points. We are staying true to our values and making sure that our students' educational programs are similar, hopefully if not better, than what they are this year. We have no teacher reductions. No programs will be eliminated. The contract settlement resulted in healthcare concessions that allowed us to avoid privatization, assuming, of course, that the budget passes. And, of course, this is a very fiscally responsible budget. If you're interested in finding out more about the budget, there'll be a great deal that'll be available online, including the user-friendly budget, budget summary outlines, as well as the budget presentations that you're seeing tonight. I will also be going around the town to every one of the schools. I'll be presenting at different community activities. I'll be at the municipal complex, at the senior center, all around town. So if there's a list of all of the events that I'll be at on the website, you are all welcome to come. And we are very interested in your input and your feedback, certainly on the budget. And I would just like to remind everyone that election this year is actually Wednesday, not a Tuesday. It's Wednesday, April 27th. Polls open from 2 p.m. until 9 in the evening. We ask that you remember to vote. And I leave you with this one thought, that 4 out of every 5 registered voters typically do not vote in school board elections. So please make your voice heard and come out on Wednesday, April 27th. I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Schiff.